Today, the lockdown in Belgium officially ended, and you can enjoy a drink at your favorite terrace. Today, restaurants, bars, gyms, and churches all reopened. And you can see around the city, restaurants and bars are setting up tables on the streets outside their establishments. Now, that's because the restrictions for this reopening require that tables be 1.5 meters apart from each other. And for bars, patrons can't order drinks at the bar, they have to order from tables. Now, that's going to mean that small restaurants and bars without outdoor space probably aren't going to open because they won't be able to accommodate that. Now, not everything is reopening today in Belgium. Movie theaters and regular theaters will not be opening until the 1st of July, and nightclubs and spectator sports will not be opening until September at the earliest. Now, we're still not really sure what this is going to look like here. We've already seen some kind of neighborhood bars reopening with social distancing inside, but it is a Monday and most bars are closed here on Monday. So we're probably going to see which bars choose to reopen later in the week. But what's that experience going to be like? We're really not sure. Here in the center of Brussels, bars are very tiny, and it's a very common thing in all but the coldest winter months for people to order their drink, take it outside, and stand on the street. The question is, how's that going to work in this situation? Let's say these bars decide to serve takeaway drinks out of their window, and people are drinking them on the street outside. Well, if the police come, couldn't the bar say, well, we have nothing to do with these people. We just gave them their drinks, but they're standing on a public street. It's really unclear how that's going to work. And there's a lot of skepticism here about whether these rules are really going to be followed in the long term. Belgium is not really known as a country that obsessively follows rules, to be honest. A lot of people here make the joke that it's Europe's northernmost Mediterranean country, and I think that's probably insulting to Mediterranean countries, but it's true that in this respect, Belgium is very different from its neighbors, Netherlands and Germany. Rules are often interpreted as just being a guideline. So will these rules actually be respected? The big question is whether or not people are really going to be stopped from ordering drinks at the bar. We'll have to wait and see. But people are also questioning whether this is too early. This reopening is coming much earlier than the government had outlined in its plan. And the Belgian government is saying that's because we're really not where they expect it to be now. The caseload has gone down much faster than they expected, and the hospital capacity is much higher than they would have expected at this point. Right now, there's only 700 people in hospital for coronavirus in all of Belgium. That is a huge reduction from the highs back in April. So the government is saying, look, we're ready to do this now because the hospitals have capacity and we have tracing systems in place. That's why they're asking people to not interact with more than 10 people in a week, because you should be able to trace, if a positive diagnosis for coronavirus comes, you need to be able to say all the people you were in contact with over the past weeks. Now, there may be another reason for the reopening now, and this is something that policymakers aren't really saying publicly, but that I'm hearing a lot, which is that because the hospital capacity is so much larger now, summer is actually the best time to have a potential second wave. And that's because the normal illnesses that come in the winter, especially seasonal flu, aren't taking up beds in the hospitals. Another potential good reason is that people will tend to visit elderly parents or grandparents indoors, at least, a lot less in the summer than later in the year. And so this may be a kind of policy of a managed herd mentality. If the government is expecting that it will be younger people not at risk who will probably take advantage of this reopening first. If those younger people start spreading the disease between themselves, a lot of younger people will have no or very mild symptoms, and so it may be that they have the virus for a bit and then eventually develop immunity this summer. So by the time it comes to a time of the year, Christmas time for instance, that they would be more likely to be visiting older people indoors, they will have already had the virus pass and can't infect anyone and also can't get it. No one really wants to say that publicly right now, but it does appear that may be what's happening. This also came up this past weekend. There was a massive protest in support of the Black Lives Matter movement here in Brussels yesterday. 10,000 people crammed into a relatively small square. Now, I was at that protest yesterday. Everyone was wearing masks, but there was no social distancing going on. People were on top of each other. People's faces were basically right here. And this has prompted a lot of concern because obviously this is not social distancing in any way. And technically violated the law. Now, this wasn't an authorized demonstration, but the government also didn't do anything to stop it. A lot of people are saying this certainly didn't adhere to the rule of not having more than 4 people gather, and it could result in a very, very fast spike in cases that the hospitals and government aren't ready to accommodate. Now, these were mostly younger people at this demonstration, and the government is hoping that those people don't immediately go and visit their parents and their grandparents. People who were at the demonstration yesterday are being told, look, you should really try to stay away from older people for at least the next 2 weeks. Now, if they did, and maybe they just spread the virus among one another, it could put us in a better position in the autumn when all of these people interact with older people. The basic fact is we just don't know right now. And so this is going to be a kind of cautious approach. But the government says, look, things are reopening now, but we're not saying you have to go to a bar and restaurant. So if you feel uncomfortable, particularly if you're in a risk group, you should really stay home. Now, the other big change we had today is that from today, we can start taking little mini trips within Belgium. Before today, we had to stay in our own cities unless we had a very important reason to be leaving. Now, given Belgium is such a small country, certainly the more exciting news is that from the 15th of June, we can leave Belgium again. The question is, who will have us? Right now, a lot of countries, including Greece, are not allowing people from Belgium to come in. Belgium is on a blacklist, including several other countries, because of its high caseload. Now, the European Commission says that all of these internal EU borders will be open by the end of this month, but there's still a lot of questions. For instance, the borders could be open, but the country could be barring entry from specific airports. So for instance, if Greece said, well, our land border is open to all people coming from Belgium, but we're forbidding flights coming from Belgium's 2 airports, that's effectively a ban on Belgium, but would still be within the spirit of the EU's law. Possibly. We're really seeing whether the Commission thinks that this would be a violation or not. The other big question is the UK. Obviously, the UK left the EU in January. Because of the transition period, British citizens are still supposed to be treated as EU citizens till the end of the year, but either way, they never were in the Schengen area. And a lot of countries really do have the intention to keep British people out this summer. And that's really complicated by the fact that today, for some bizarre reason, the UK is starting a quarantine for all incoming visitors. So anyone traveling to the UK from today needs to go through this quarantine. Obviously, countries in continental Europe are saying, well, look, if you're requiring a quarantine on your end, then on our end, we either have to put people from the UK in a quarantine or just bar them altogether. The UK is, it's being reported today, scrambling, trying to convince the EU 27 to allow British people into their favorite holiday destinations like Spain and Greece. 3/4 of British people take their summer holidays in another country in Europe, in an EU country. And so this could really be bad for, it could be bad for tour operators in these countries in Southern Europe. Don't forget, for Americans, Spain is kind of the Florida of the UK in that the UK has notoriously not very good weather, and a lot of people take their holidays there, and a lot of people retire there. So we're waiting to see. The UK government seems to be under the impression that it will end its quarantine by mid-July, and then British people will be able to travel wherever they like in Europe. In continental Europe, they're saying, well, not so fast. The UK's caseload is dramatically higher than everywhere else in Europe except for Sweden, which never went into lockdown, and so it has a huge, huge number of cases. Sweden is also an open question. Many countries are absolutely refusing to let flights come from Sweden. Sweden is in the Schengen area and in the EU, and so it's not clear if that's going to be legal. So UK and Sweden are the 2 big question marks right now. I think what looks certain is that British people are going to have a hard time traveling this summer, no matter what. But really, this applies to everyone. The internal borders here in Europe may be reopening. The external borders are still not open, so that means that non-EU citizens cannot come here to Europe this summer. They may reopen this autumn. We're waiting to see. But even for travel within Europe, a lot is uncertain here. There's reports of airlines selling tickets for flights they have no intention of operating. So booking a trip right now is probably pretty risky. My advice would be to wait until August to take a vacation and to wait until late July to book that vacation. Now, that's not great if people do that for the struggling airlines and tourism industry. So if you really want to support your favorite airline, your favorite hotel, and to prevent them from going out of business, by all means, book your flight now, and just know that your flight and your trip could be canceled at the last minute, and you'll get a voucher that you could then use for the airline. But if money's tight, I would really say wait. August is probably the wiser time to take a holiday, and we'll have a better idea then of what the situation's going to look like.